Hey, welcome to the channel. I'm Oliver and this is Code Uncomplicated. So a couple of weeks back, I published an article about production ready REST APIs and beyond the hello world examples that you go out there. Over here, we're going to get into unit testing our API because I think people do unit test their code, but unit testing API is seldom overlooked. But it is essential to have this setup. And what we're going to do is quickly, we'll use the same base project that was part of the previous article. I'm going to create another branch and we're going to have to do some little bit of refactoring on that. Now, the good thing about the framework that we've chosen, it has good documentation. So this is we chose GoFiber. If you go to the examples, so many frameworks are well documented in Golang, and it's good practice to just go through their GitHub repos and search for examples. You don't have to break your head over there. If I go down here, there is already a unit testing example. So let's look at the unit test. So you have to understand now when you're unit testing your API, what you're testing is whether your routing is set up correctly. So we can do the routing, our routes, our handlers, and probably we'll even look at calling some service code and make sure that all that wiring is done. So it looks simple enough. But what I notice here, this setup function, we do not have something like that. Yeah. So they've set it up in a way where there's a setup function that returns the entire fiber application, and that's why they can call that in their unit test and test against that. So the great thing is fiber itself gives us this .test. So it takes looks like it takes the request and gives back a response. So we're going to quickly go ahead and create a new branch. So I'll just do we will call it unit test from origin main, and we'll go ahead and refactor our code. So I'll go ahead and refactor the code to make it more unit test friendly. So I've gone ahead and done the refactoring. Essentially what I did, I've created a new package for the server and created a server struct that holds a fiber application, and I've implemented a few methods on top of that struct. So there's a setup method with a start server and the graceful shutdown. So now our main looks a lot cleaner, so that's pretty good. What I can do here is my start server I can call as start setup over here. Why is it called setup? This is kind of like a template pattern. I don't want this to be called setup. Just call it setup and it works. And even start server seems a bit redundant, so let's just call it start. What about shutdown gracefully? That seems okay. So there we have it. Below refactoring. So now I'm going to go ahead and write our first unit test case for this and see how that goes. I'm getting a failure. I want to know what the failed path is, so that's why I'm just adding that over here. This is the fun of unit testing, right? It lets me quickly iterate. When I have an issue, it's going to let me quickly find out what it is. So let's see what we get. When we are unit testing, unfortunately, I have to call this setup method, and as you see, it's a private method, so it's perfectly fine for me to call this from within this test case, because the test file and the actual server file is in the same package. Or if you see the main, when I implemented that, it's like a template method. I call start server and start server called setup, so I don't have to bother about it there. But here I have to. So now our test should pass. No. That was the issue. This error returns 500, not 404. Sorry, not 200. So correct now. Success. So let me just take you through all the refactoring that I did. Let's start from the main. So oops, there's an issue over here. I changed this, so let me just, yeah. So here's the main method. I've kind of tidied it up a bit. I have a server struct that encapsulates my Fiber application, and going forward, it's also going to hold all our services. So that's a really nice way to achieve a dependency injection without any extra framework. It's kind of keeps things simple, since our app is a bit simple, and you see in Golang, I like this simplicity a lot. So another change that I had to do was bring the config under server. That is because I wanted to call this in my test case, and when I'm inside a package, I cannot refer to something that is in main. So I went ahead and got the config also under server, so I can do this over here. What else? That's about it. There's a setup method. So setup is responsible for setting up our routes and our middlewares, and going further, we'll also put our services over here and do the injection, dependency injection. I put a little bit of validation as well. So in case somehow somebody tries to start the server without the setup being called, it'll fail. And that's about it. There are just two methods to start and stop, and then we'll move on to the server test. So again, I have just copied this from the examples in GitHub. Set up a test struct. So this is an easy way to see whether our routes exist. And you've seen that I had made a mistake for my exception route. I put a 200 and automatically my test case failed. So that got me thinking of why, and then I went and seen that it was 500. So this is an easy way to make sure that our routes are set up correctly. So I just set up all the routes over there. I have to create an instance of the server here, give it the fiber application. This is an extra step specific for my test cases. I need to call setup because I'm not going to start the server now, so I need to call setup. And then this is just the test, which I basically create a request, send it to the test method, and assert that I should not get exceptions, and that's it. Next, what we're going to do is a bit further. Let's see what happens when we introduce a service or business logic, because most of the APIs that are going to write is going to have some sort of business logic. So let's see how to set that up and do it in a way where we can unit test that as well. Okay, and let's do this into TDD fashion. We're going to assume that we have a quote service that calls out to some service out there on the internet and displays some quote. But first what we'll do is we'll write the test case. We don't want to write the implementation for it. We're just going to write the test case for it. And the unit test is going to ensure that everything is wired correctly. So when we finally wire in our actual implementation, it should work fine. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I've gone ahead and defined the simple service, and the key thing over here is I've defined it as an interface, and this is going to let me give mock implementations and write unit tests for it. So it's very simple. It's just a quota service. I don't know whether I've spelled that correctly, but it's a quota service that just returns a random quote. And so let's see now how to write a test case for that. So I've gone ahead and set up the test case. So we've defined it so that when we hit /quote, it returns 200 for us, and a lot of copy pasted code from the code above. Let's see. So ideally, it should fail. And right enough it has. It's a 404 not found for the quote. So now let's go and make the configuration till it passes. So I'm getting a 500 instead of a 200, which is good because earlier I was getting a 404 not found. So let me go and fix it and see what exactly is the issue. Something has not been configured correctly. So I need to give it a quote. Now the great thing about this is I can mock it, right? So I can say that took me a while to find out. I did something stupid. So I was returning nil over here in my mock test, and the thing was this condition fails over here because I tried to essentially dereference a nil pointer. So that was my bad. But this is why a unit test is helpful. So I was able to track that down. So something in my implementation I was able to track down. So that was pretty good. So now let me tell you what I have done so far. So you already know that it's the code service, and because of the way I've defined the service as an interface, I have simply gone and mocked the service, right? The service does not exist. I've just gone and mocked it over here, and I've given the mock implementation. And to ensure all the wiring is working, what I've done is let's follow along from the handler. So the handler code is a bit different than the ones you see above. So the dependency of this handler is a quota service. So that's why I've taken that as an input. And the thing I can do here with GoFiber is have a function that returns the same type as the handlers. So it lets me take the quota and internally call the code service, call out to the code service, handle exceptions, and send a response. Now another good thing about this, if you've read the blog post, we've set up centralized error handling. So because of that, I can simply do this. I can just, if I get an exception from my code service, I can simply return an exception over here and have centralized error handling handle it, take care of it. So that's about it. And since we've done this, let's go ahead and write another negative test where it throws an exception. So what I should do, I can just change this type to quote is a string and is an error. Then I can do things like I can make it a little more generic. So success. So what I've done over here, I've even tested out my exception handling. So centralized exception handling is set at the API level. So now my mock implementation, it just ignores the response and it sends an exception. So my response code should be a 500, and that's exactly what I get. So that's about it. So we've gone ahead and refactored our code and made it unit test friendly, and we've tested our APIs. So we are confident that whatever routes we've set up, whatever services we've set up, have been wired correctly. And because of this method, I don't even have the code service right now, but I was able to give a mock implementation and test it out. So finally, when I have the actual implementation, I just go over here and wire the actual service and everything should work. So that's about it. Thanks for watching.